So then the next thing you talked about was going home. The families feeling like they miss their friends, they miss their family, they miss their home. And so I'm going to talk a little bit, Terry's really good at correcting my to psychology language, but so the term is psychoeducation, but just like context, I guess, is what I'm talking about. So some context to what's going on and what's driving some of that is, whenever we move from town to town, whether there's been a incident of war or terrorism or trauma, even if it's just, I moved from the north to the south, the loss of familiarity is going to make us uncomfortable. And there's going to be a period of time that we feel really disoriented. I knew how things were. I knew where the shops were. I knew people, they knew me. Now I'm in a place, nobody knows me. I don't even know how to find, where to find the food I like to eat, or I speak the language, but not so well, or people speak too fast, or I don't, I learned English with a different accent and I don't understand these people's accent. These are things that anybody goes through when they make a move. And so add on top of that, the uncertainty that they're dealing with in the moment, and the fact that they do have family and friends back and property, back in Ukraine. And so this feeling of, I want to go home, I want to go back, that is part of the disorientation of the move. It is part of the flight response in trauma. And so when someone says, I want to go back, what they want to go back to is the way it was before, the orientation they had before. I want to go back to my home. I want my kids to go to their school. I want to have coffee where I have coffee. I want to go see my grandmother or my sister or my friend. I want to go to work. I just want to do what I used to do before this war happened. And of course they do. And while they're feeling unsettled, that urge is going to be so strong because their natural survival instinct is to call on what they know. And so this feeling of going back makes a lot of sense. But that's what's going on there. So as a host, what you can do just to help, if you feel like you want to, is, help with things that are familiar. And so whatever space that may be theirs, if it's okay with you, you may want to discuss with your guest, is there anything we can do to make this feel more comfortable for you, to make this space feel a little bit familiar? Can we print some pictures off your phone and frame them and put them in the house around, or anything like that? Is there something that's not here that we could, just run out and pick up, and that would make it feel more comfortable for you? And anything like that would be really helpful for them. Again, you need to understand people have, again, different kinds of homes, right? Different abilities to do those things. And, we all have our own idiosyncrasies as well, in terms of like, I like my things where they are, and that's a thing. And, you need to be comfortable in your own home as well. So somewhere in what lies comfortable for you, that could be helpful. But ultimately, if they want to go home and they want to go back, and that urge is so strong, that's their choice.
And it's really hard, I think, for the hosts to see that, or maybe not even to see the signs that might be coming, because they might not have that conversation in the early stages, and it might just come to a stage where they just say, I'd like to go home. And for a host to really want to help and see the pain that their guests are going through, it must be really tough to see.
Yeah, especially because you're experiencing it too. You've got this other family in your house. And, you may feel a bit rejected. I've done everything. Oh my goodness. I moved things out. I put my kids in, to share a room. I did this, I did that. I went to training. I really, really, really want this to work. I really, really, really want to help you. Sometimes that'll be helpful and sometimes it won't. And that's just, it's going to be up to the individual. So you can only do the best that you can do, and respect your guests' choices. And may not be the choice that you would make or that you want them to make, but it is their choice to make. So it's their choice to make, and just remembering that. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be sad for you.
Is it, from a host perspective, do you think it would be useful for them to keep in touch with the guest after they've gone back, just in case they see that maybe it hasn't, like you said, they think they're going back to how it was when they get there? If they feel that actually they realize it's not what they were hoping, do you think they need, would it be beneficial to keep the relationship between the host and the guest open for a while, or do you think that would be too difficult for both?
I think it's difficult for the host. I would imagine probably, again, each situation is going to be different, but my gut would tell me that maybe the better thing to do would say, well, you know where we are and you know how to get in touch with us, and please do. And then cut it, because you need to then go back to your life and remind yourself what I agreed to was to provide a safe place for a minimum of 6 months and to point people in the right direction. And so your job is done. And so the rest it's really out of your hands now. If you want to keep an open door and let them know that, and that's comfortable for you, absolutely. But the keeping in touch, you're so tied, and your secondary trauma. And again, we talk about that in the training videos, the secondary trauma that you receive from hearing the stories and being, involved in the lives of people that have experienced trauma. You're keeping yourself triggered, and it's not healthy for you. Yeah. They need to deal with what they need to deal with. So understand the heart, but ultimately it's probably not helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The second thing I would talk about is this children of similar age. And, the friction, again, feelings of, we were buddies for weeks and now you found other friends, and and now you're at home, and we used to play and now we don't play, and all of those things. And this is kind of the collateral damage, I guess, of what some of this can be. And again, really important, if you haven't done it already, to establish separation and boundaries, good boundaries, meaning that your guest family has their space and your family has your space. And that may even look like, we eat our dinner from this time to this time, and we're going to do it in this room. It might be, we always eat dinner separate. And if you want to invite me to have dinner with you, that's lovely. And if I want to invite you to have dinner with me, that's lovely. But the expectation is we don't do that. We're basically just kind of sharing a home, and we are supportive and friendly with one another, but we're not a family. And so it's hard for kids to understand that. It's probably, conversations with your own children, helping them understand what that looks like. And it could be, like if you live in a neighborhood, let's say you live in a semi-detached home, there's a family next door, you know them, you talk to them, you see them, sometimes you play with them outside, but then you go home. Maybe that's the way you describe it to them, or, something of that nature, that they understand that even though they're in the room next door, that's kind of like, imagine, there's a bubble around that, and that's not really our house anymore for that time while they're in there, and help them understand that. And then if it feels like there's conflict or things of that nature, that's sitting down with your guest and saying, aware the kids aren't getting along. Let's look at that together. is there something that we can do together to maybe make that better, and get your heads together. And again, you're not just dealing with different cultures, you're dealing with different personalities. And so one guest is going to have one experience, you know, one host and guest will have one experience, another host and guest will have another. It just depends on the personality of who you're talking with, how traumatized they are, what they've left behind, how activated their children are, how acting out their kids might be, how acting out your kids may be, because somebody's in the home and things have changed and they maybe don't have the words to express what that feels like, or, you know, so there's so much going on here that's going to be so different in every situation. I would just encourage communication, acknowledge, you know, name the elephant in the room. You said earlier something about a Brit style of communication versus a Ukrainian style of communication. Totally relate to that. An American living in England for 13 years. In the US, we are direct. We don't do the soft sell. We do the, hey, that's too loud. Or could you turn it down? We do that. We don't do, I'm wondering if it would be okay with you just for a little bit while I'm still home because I have a headache. If you wouldn't mind, it's okay if you mind, you don't have to, but if you wouldn't mind, you know, it's a very different way of communicating. Now's not the time to talk about, is that helpful or unhelpful? It's just different. And so acknowledging that and realizing that, understanding this is the way, you know, once we understand it, then we can work with it so much better. Oh, right. American says, turn that down, it's too loud. Brit says, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, you know, fill in the rest of the sentence. Two different, we're both saying the same thing. We're saying it in two different ways. You know, sometimes that, if you've ever experienced in a work environment where they do these psychometric testing and they say, you know, this person is this style and this person is this style, and you learn how to speak to somebody with that style. So if I'm a control, let's say, you know, the way to talk to me is to say, okay, let's talk about how we're going to make this happen. ... And if you're, let's say, more sanguine, more personal, the way that I talk to you is to say, you know, how was your weekend? And, you know, did your daughter come visit? Oh, I'm so glad you had a good time. Can we sit down? Let's grab a cup of coffee and talk about, you know, how we're going to make this happen. But that's what's going to need to happen, is your understanding of that's actually what they're saying. They're just saying it a different way. And how can I communicate with the person I'm talking to? Just like you're going to have to learn to be more direct when you talk to them so that they understand you. Hopefully they will learn to be less direct when they talk to you. May or may not happen, but at least you can do your part.
Yeah. So going back to what you were saying about having their own space, if you originally had agreed that you were going to share meals, but you were then finding, you know, this kind of friction, do you think it is best to sit down with the family, or at least with the parents, and say, we are going to make our own safe spaces between us, so that we reduce the amount of friction? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would keep it to just the parents. I wouldn't involve the children in the conversation. And absolutely say, hey, it's been a month, 2 months. Let's check in. Let's regroup. We had said this initially. I'm kind of feeling like, actually, now that everybody's settled, it might be better going forward to, you know, do these things independently and, you know, extend an invitation, you know, for a meal together. So you want to invite me to your house? Please do. I'd love to come, you know, and I may want to invite you to my house, and, you know, would love for you to do that. And so just kind of, yeah, hey, here's where we are now. things are settled, sorted. This is what looks like it's happening. Let's regroup.
What would happen if that extended out into a school environment as well? So if they're the same age, they've potentially been put into the same school or maybe even the same class in that school. Is there a conversation that should happen with the school as well, or do you just kind of leave it and see how it plays out?
I don't think so, but I'm not an expert on that. I would think that would probably be, different for different, for different situations. I do know from speaking with the people at Refugee Education UK that at school, it's best to, a kid is a kid and a problem is a problem, and not to call too much attention to the fact that these are guests in our country for an unknown period of time, and just let them assimilate to school like any other child would. That seems to be, it makes sense to me. I think the conversation's more with your own child, same thing. So, it's been a month, it's been 2 months, everyone's settled, things are going to kind of go, kind of find their new normal. Thank you so much, honey, for being so wonderful to our guest and introducing them and spending time with them. And you did great and so appreciate it. And, and now they're a friend like any other friend, and they may be a good friend, or they may just be a friend you see at school, or, but you did great. And thanks, honey. And, thanks for being part of this with the family. Really, really appreciate that you went out of your way.
Yeah. Just
you almost release them from the responsibility, and say things like, name it. It's okay if you have an argument. It's okay if you don't like their other friends. It's okay if you don't want to spend a lot of time with them. They've met people now. They're getting used to it. They're okay. Their mom and dad, or their mom is here, or whatever family member they might be with. You did your part, and just be kind. And that's all I ask. That kind of thing, something of that nature.
Yeah. Okay.
Let them off the hook.
That's good. And I was just thinking about the language. You're talking about we were talking about Brits and Americans and Ukrainians. Actually, they have a term that they say to me. It's inconvenient English. I don't always, if we say too much, it becomes white noise to them. So that if we're direct,
interesting.
It's less words, so they can understand. But if I
exactly, and that's with any language, right? So if this is your second language, for some people they'll be thinking in the language. But for other people, they'll be translating in their head. And it's the speed that people speak in, it's the accent they may have, it's the local vernacular that, if I say homely in the US, that means ugly. If you say homely in the UK, that means comfortable and warm, and, so same word, but it has a different meaning. And so all of that, they're filtering through. And so absolutely excellent point. Less is more.
It helps with the translation app as well, because if you waffle on the translation app, it comes up with all manner of translation.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that, because Tanya Breeze, who we work with, Ukrainian, training to be a clinical psychologist, actually, she looked at the subtitles on the introduction to the To Be Known channel, and kind of with a little giggle was like, well, kind of sort of says what you said, so actually she's working on doing a cleaner translation for us on the subtitles. So absolutely, Google Translate is only as good as, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. Absolutely. That's an excellent point. Less is more. I think in conclusion, less is more. And just always try to think about what it's like for them, not necessarily what it's like would be like for you, because maybe you're quick with languages, or maybe, that might be different, but the person in front of you, like, how are they responding? Does it seem like I'm speaking too fast? does it seem like they're picking up on what I'm saying? Are they smiling when I make a joke, or do they have a blank face? You know, what is going on? How are they reacting? Not how do I think I would react, but what is actually, you know, going on here in front of me? That's the kind of thing that you want to be looking at.
So it's really about being in tune and actually seeing rather than just speaking and hearing.
Yeah. And that's it. What are they telling me by their actions, by their behavior, by, like, are there signals? And am I going slow enough to pick up on them?